Alright, fellas, we are back. A little bit later than I anticipated. I was actually quite busy today. I wanted to get to this video a little earlier, but here we are. So, we're going to be taking a look at the best merge project red tomes in the game. Now, there's one thing you got to keep in mind when it comes to red tomes. As we'll see when we take a look at the infantry ones, they have two ways that they can get through damage reduction, which is null follow-up magic, or magic null follow-up, or special spiral 4. Unfortunately, Flare did not live up to expectations, as we already know, so it's going to be a little tougher for the non-infantry mages to really deal with DR, which is kind of a shame because we're starting things off with this really awesome artwork Groom Robin that we got on the Bride banner this year. He's going to be a Tempest Trial prize, so you would have to get him plus 10 by using heroic grails. But his stat line is really nuts. Like, this dude's got a monster attack stat. He makes really nice use of Arcane Eclipse because it's very rare for cavalry types to get special reduction. So Arcane Eclipse works out pretty favorably for him. It also gives him all stats up 5, -1 special trigger, and a guaranteed follow-up, and nullifies his penalties to attack. So that just allows him to nuke even harder. We've got Ruptured Sky here. There's like no point in running anything. Well, I guess you could run like something else, like maybe Draconic Aura or Dragon Fang, but like I said, it's very difficult for cavalry types to really ramp into specials, so we're going to stick to Ruptured Sky because it's the easiest to just get ready for him. Remote Sparrow gives him attack and speed, which his speed is solid, but his attack was like caveman level, so you're going to want him to just boost up his attack and speed. Also gives him a little bit of DR on that first hit, so he can then use Escape Route after combat and then use the Canto to get himself to safety. We got Defense and Res Smoke as well on this build so that he can give himself Pathfinder for your other units to benefit from and debuff the enemies after he attacks. Blade Session just to get the maximum amount of attack and speed because his speed isn't really the highest, but the guaranteed follow-up from Arcane Eclipse can break through Wary Fighter. So with extra speed stacking, he can then possibly win the speed check and just get a natural double attack. So this is like his version of null follow-up here, which is pretty good. And his stat line, like I said, was very, very phenomenal. So we're really just waiting on some better skills for the mages that are not infantry types. Like, once we start getting that, then this dude is going to be looking way, way stronger. Okay, so let's go ahead and move on to Zephyia up next. Zephyia is a flying red tome type, and she is one of the best that we have access to. We've only really gotten 2 free-to-play red tome flyers, the other one being Aversa, who we also have in here, because this is just like such a rare movement type with weapon type to be getting free-to-play, so it's also a bonus that Zephyia ended up with a very nice stat line and very good weapon. So, she's got a super boon on attack, I believe. She has a super boon on attack. Her speed doesn't have a super boon, but her weapon gives her speed up 3 anyway. So, that's obviously the 2 stats we're going to go for here. So, we got Reposition, Ruptured Sky, Flared Sparrow. She can make pretty solid use of Flared Sparrow, being a flyer type. I gave her Brash Assault 4 just to get the guaranteed follow-up and some damage reduction when she initiates, so she can possibly be able to survive a hit the enemies again, and then the augmented damage from Brash Assault can help you out a bit. Then we got Attack and Speed Oath 4, so she can jump in, and then Attack and Speed Catch, which works pretty favorably with her weapon. She has a debuff weapon where she... what is it? Sabotage? I think it does like a sabotage effect. Hold on. Let's pull up speed, and then we'll find Zephyia, and then I'll show you guys. Yeah, because I'm pretty sure she does like a sabotage type of effect here. We can make this a little bigger, too. Okay, so yeah, so she inflicts speed and res -6 and panic on the nearest foes within 5 spaces a unit, and foes within 2 spaces of those foes through the next action. So it's a better version of a menace skill, basically. And it's also going to chain affect any enemies that are within 2 spaces of targets. So, pretty good. And then she has a further in-combat debuff based on whatever debuffs the enemies already have active, which she's doing speed and res -6. So, you can really stack up a bunch of damage with her. And then she has half a null follow-up, which allows her to eat through Wary Fighter effects. So actually, you could even go for like wind sweep or water sweep on her because she has that built into her weapon. So she could attack even more safely and not have to worry about like what the enemies are doing. But Brash Assault giving the augmented damage, I think, is worthwhile for her. And Flared Sparrow, of course, giving all the true damage that it does. Like, these are ways that you can sort of bust through damage reduction on enemies. So this is why I went with what I went with. Also, she works out pretty favorably with Rally Spectrum support, as you'll see with a lot of units here as well that don't have -1 special trigger. If you've got Rally Spectrum from the new Robin, the Brave one, you just instantly clap with Ruptured Skies. So it could be possible support option for her. Okay, next up we have Erk over here, who dude, I love saying this guy's name, Erk, right? Like, that's so badass. He reminds me, like, if I ever think of a mage in Fire Emblem, he's always the first one that pops into mind, because he's literally the first mage we get to play as in FE7, if that's the first game you started with. So Erk has a special place in my heart, plus his name just sounds like he's from medieval times, man. This dude is from Lord of the Rings with a name like that. So Erk over here, he makes very good use of Arcane Eclipse. Where the build we're running here can pretty much work on every red tome. Like, let's be real. You just got Times Pulse, Quick Impulse, and Special Spiral 4 with Arcane Eclipse, so you're just always using your special attack. Dragon Fang preferable for him because his defense and res aren't like the craziest. His res is okay, but it's not like 40 plus like some of these other mages can get to. So Dragon Fang boosting off his attack is more preferable in this situation. So that's what we're going with there. And again, like I said, this build could work on pretty much any red tome you want. So like red tomes, infantry at least, are in a very good position where they just have this bread and butter build that will work on any of them. So he has a super boon on speed, which is pretty nice. He gets to a pretty reasonable speed stat there, which is good. And then we just go plus attack with the florets if you're interested in giving him a floret. So Erk is a very, very powerful mage there. Okay, next up we have Mommy here, the Dami Mommy. So Hilda's got dominance built into her weapon. So again, very similar build to what we saw on Erk, although Hilda has super boons on both attack and res. So we're going for plus attack plus res here to make those icebergs hit even harder. She doesn't have -1 special trigger on her weapon, so getting to that first iceberg could be a little tricky, but once you do, you're in business. And as I said previously, Rally Spectrum would just instantly get you to that iceberg, so consider that an option. Now, Hilda's weapon has dominance built in, obviously, and it also... Hold on, let me actually pull up Hilda, because my memory is a little bit off on some of these tome units. Okay, so she gets res up 3 flat. She grants herself dominance if she's in 4 spaces of a foe and inflicts attack and res -6 on the nearest foes through the next action. So basically, she's got a better version of Menace there. And then if she's in combat or not adjacent, initiates combat or not adjacent, she just gets attack and res up 6. So pretty solid weapon. Dominance, of course, is going to allow you to hit even harder when you've got Special Spiral and Times Pulse. So it's basically just a nuking build there. Alright, and then we've got Aversa, of course. Aversa has access to a Resplendent alt if you want to buy that, but that's not free to play, and this is a free-to-play video, so we're not going to show off the extra stats she gets from that. The speed extra actually really helps, so it is something to consider if you really like Aversa. Now, her weapon also has a debuffing effect similar to Zephyia, where she, well, is it similar to Zephyia? It's just like all adjacent allies that are, all enemies that are adjacent with 3 less HP than her are going to be panicked and take all stats -4. And then in combat, she augments penalties by 4 plus whatever current penalty they have and debuffs the enemies even further. So Aversa can do a lot of debuffs on the enemy. You want to be stacking HP on this unit, which is pretty interesting. We've just recently gotten these new Squad Ace seals that give HP plus 5 and double stats plus 3. So this is the one that gives HP 5 and then attack and speed up 3. Fire Flood boost, inflicts guard, and then gives her the most amount of attack and res. Now, preferably, you would want to go for, what would it be called? Fire Storm boost 3, the one that gives attack and speed up 3. but that doesn't exist yet, so we'll have to wait a little bit on that. Although Fire Flood Boost still gets the job done. You're just getting HP, you inflict guard, raises her bulk a little bit too, which can be pretty solid because her bulk is not too shabby after all the debuffs are done. And then Ruptured Sky for some added damage, Brash Assault to give her the guaranteed follow-up, possibly giving her like a quasi way to have null follow-up if you break their Wary Fighter and get the speed double. And then Soaring Guidance just for some extra support there. So Aversa held up pretty well. She is one of the better aging Grand Hero Battle units. Okay, next up we have Morgan over here. So Morgan is going to be our first user of Flare. So Flare is a special that we just recently got. It didn't live up to expectations, and it's infantry lock too. Like, they really hindered the amount of people you can give this to for no reason. Now, what it does is it augments your damage by 70% of the enemy's res if your HP is over... What is it? So, hold on, I might be remembering this wrong. Forgive me for being, like, off the ball today. Let's just go ahead and search for Flare. Me not remembering, like, what all the stuff does today. So, if your HP is over 70%, when you trigger the special, you get 60% bonus damage based on the enemy's res. And if your HP is below 70%, when you trigger the special, you get 40% of the foe's res as bonus damage, and you recover 30% of your max HP. So it's a nice little sustain tool there with some pretty big damage if you're fighting high res mages or high res tanks that are going to augment the damage even further. We've got Attack and Speed Finish 4, Magic Null Follow-Up, Times Pulse 4, and Attack and Speed Solo 3 there. Now, his daddy would be his best support partner, obviously, giving him Rally Spectrum. So, with Times Pulse 4 and Rally Spectrum, you just instantly hit him with Flare. So, that works out pretty well. And then Magic Null Follow-Up is really nice on him as both an offensive and defensive tool, because it gives him a way to cut through damage reduction at least, and then also it's nice defensively because you can prevent enemies from doing guaranteed follow-ups. We got his Resplendent ult today, by the way, and it actually really helps him out quite a bit because this is a unit that does want to be gaining like every single stat point that he can. The extra speed is nice, and his weapon, the way that his weapon works is by debuffing the enemies with a menace effect. So if he's in 4 spaces of target enemies, he'll inflict attack speed and res -5 on them, and then he gains attack speed and res +5 to himself. And then also in combat, he has the same effect as Aversa, where he's augmenting the enemy's debuffs by additional amounts based on how many debuffs they have. So just an overall like solid build for him. He can be bulky, so we want the recovery, Magic Null follow-up for both offense and defense, etc. So he's a pretty good merge project, even though he's been around for a while, so definitely don't sleep on this Morgan. Alright, next up we come to the wonky, well, I guess Canis isn't really a wonky addition, but these 3 Grand Hero Battle choices over here get into wonky territory with the ways that their weapons work, right? So Veld's Petrify, he hasn't been refined yet, by the way, so this guy only stands to get better, right? And I do think his weapon is actually not the worst in the world. So at the start of turns 1 through 5, what his weapon does is it's going to inflict gravity and attack and speed -7 on the target on the enemy's team with the lowest stat. And for each turn, that stat is going to change. So on turn 1, it's HP. On turn 2, it's attack. On turn 3, it's speed. Turn 4, defense. And then turn 5, res. So, inflicting gravity, like, just for free like that, and the attack and speed -7 can really come in handy, man. That's nothing to sneeze at. So, I do think he's got some value there just for a debuffer that can mess with the enemies. And, of course, with the build that we have here, Ruptured Sky, Spiral 4, Oath 4, Finish 4, Form 3, like, you're just stacking up his attack and res as high as you can, and he's going to nuke as hard as possible, so even when he's not really, like, getting Petrify on the target that you want him to, he can still do a lot of damage and help you out that way. So, just waiting on this refine for this guy. I think his refine is going to be really juicy, so he's not a bad merge project. Alright, next up we have Canis over here, who has a solid enough refine that we don't need to rely on the Arcane Eclipse for him. So it gives him -1 special trigger on the start of the first 3 turns. So not every turn, but only the first 3, which should be good enough, I would say. Then it also gives him 20% bonus damage based on the higher of his res or the enemy's res. He's probably going to be the one that ends up with the most res, so we want to go for a lot of attack and res on him. He gets a lot of flowers, by the way, so him being a very old unit really helps him out. And then, of course, the classic, like, finish Spiral 4 times Pulse, Quicken Pulse build. As I said, this works on, like, every single mage. You just nuke enemies into oblivion with this. So, there you guys go for Canis. Next up, we have Garnef over here. He's got an interesting refine, but, I mean, it gets a little bit dubious. The last 2 units we're going to take a look at here, I think, are a little bit dubious, but they do have enough merits where I feel like you maybe could get away with using them. So, on the start of turn 3, this guy's weapon is going to do 7 chip damage to all enemies that are, or all non-magic enemies. I wish that wasn't there. I wish it was just all enemies. They're going to take 7 chip damage, and then if they're in 5 columns, centered on him, they're also going to get flashed. So flash is strong, obviously, so you want to be able to make a lot of use of that, and then he's not like a total wash even before turn 3, because he's getting attack and speed up 10, and then he also gets 30% DR against non-magic enemies, and he has a flash effect against non-magic enemies, which doesn't really make sense. I don't understand why they would give him DR and flash when he initiates combat on non-magic enemies. Seems counterproductive, because like if you're flashing, then they have no way to counter anyway, so the DR is a little bit useless. But I mean, don't question the way that Insys thinks. Either way, he gets a solid amount of speed, so we can go for Magic Null follow-up and a bunch of speed skills here. Blade Session, of course, and then if you want to give him Rally Spectrum support, then Ruptured Sky looks really nice on him. So there we go with Garnef. And then finally, we have Urius over here. Yeah, I'm saying Urius. That's the name that I knew him by. So regardless, he's got Loptus here. Now, he's interesting because he can play a bait role, which we haven't really seen. I mean, the Morgan M can also play a bait role if you want him to. You could give him, like, close foil and try to play up the amount of debuffs that he's doing to the enemies and then try to, like, bait the enemies like that. But I feel like it's more favorable to just go all in with attack and speed and just try to prevent enemies from doubling him anyway. So this guy's not really going to be able to do that as well. He's not quite as fast as that Morgan, so going like full-on bait build, I think, works out here. Flare, of course, for the sustain, and then Fire Flood boost for guard, and also the massive amount of bulk and attack. Null Sea Disrupt, so he can counter anybody. So this guy would be really nice against, like, Hinoka, Veronica, and all of those staff units that have Dazzling Staff. And then we got Attack and Reso 4, and then Attack and Defense Form, just to gain a little bit extra defense there for the Fire Sweep bow matchups there. So that's what I would say is probably what you want to do with him. We could get better combinations of Fire Flood boost, like Fire Earth boost. Give him some more defense would also be pretty nice. But for the time being, this is the only one that we have, so it's fine. I don't really think this guy is the worst, but I don't think he's the best either. He gets 40% res-based DR on his weapon. He can inflict a potential attack and res -11 on enemies as well, if they're not effective against dragons, which is not really the most common type of effective damage. So he's got some tools in the shed, right? Like, this guy, he's not really the worst. You can totally get away with him, and with a build like this, I think he does have some merits. So there you guys go. These are the standout Red Tome merge projects that I thought were the ones worth building. Now, of course, as I said like a million times, you could just get away with this same build on any of them. So there's really a lot of leeway when it comes to Red Tome units, at least for the infantry ones. So that's going to wrap us up for this video here. Again, none of these builds are definitive, by the way. Like, more so on the non-infantry ones. There's a lot of things you could possibly be getting away with on a lot of these other units. So just try to come up with what you think is best. These are just what I thought would work out the best. So that's what I showed off. So this is your boy Tacho signing out. Take care, fellas, and I'll catch y'all again on the flip side.